Atlantis of the South. Beneath the turbulent waters of the southern Indian Ocean lies a submerged landform unlike almost any other on Earth. The Kerguelen Plateau, stretching across more than 500,000 square miles, larger than California, it remains hidden beneath the waves, hinting at a long-lost terrestrial past. Though it now lies buried under thousands of feet of ocean water, its history suggests it may once have stood proudly above the sea. This plateau wasn't always submerged. Its origins trace back to the early Cretaceous period, around 130 million years ago, when intense volcanic activity from a deep mantle hotspot laid the groundwork for a massive igneous province. Lava spread out in enormous flows, building the structure that would become the Kerguelen Plateau, alongside formations like the Broken Ridge and the Rajmahal Traps of India. Geological surveys have shown that these regions share a common volcanic origin. At various points in its early life, portions of the plateau were likely above sea level. Ancient rivers may have once carved through the highlands and vegetation, confirmed by fossilized plant remains, including conifers, thrived in these elevated areas. The presence of coal beds further supports the notion that this region supported life on land. These clues strongly suggest the Kerguelen Plateau wasn't just ocean floor. It was once dry, habitable terrain. Core samples taken from the seabed have revealed granitic rocks typically associated with continental crust rather than the basalt more common in oceanic crust. This has led scientists to propose that the Kerguelen Plateau may be a fragment of a lost continent, separated during the breakup of the supercontinent Gondwana. As the landmass split into what we now know as South America, Africa, India, Antarctica, and Australia, Kerguelen may have sheared off and slowly sank over tens of millions of years. Today, only a few isolated landforms, most notably the Kerguelen Islands and Heard Island, remain above the waves. These islands are the last visible pieces of what was once a much larger entity. Most of the plateau lies between 3,000 and 6,000 feet below the ocean surface, hidden in the cold darkness. However, the classification of the plateau as a continent remains controversial. True continental crust is typically thick, granitic, and buoyant, while much of Kerguelen is composed of basalt, dense volcanic rock more characteristic of oceanic regions. Moreover, to qualify as a continent, geologists usually expect a landmass to include distinct geological, ecological, and topographic characteristics. Despite these challenges, the idea that Kerguelen represents a microcontinent, a continental fragment that broke away and sank, remains compelling. It may not be Atlantis, but it represents one of the most tantalizing examples of how Earth's surface continues to evolve and shift over time, burying once thriving landscapes beneath the sea. America's Viking Grail. In the late 19th century, a Swedish-American farmer named Olaf Ullman stumbled upon a large stone while clearing trees on his land near Kensington, Minnesota. The object was unlike anything local settlers had seen before, a gray slab covered in runic inscriptions that, according to early translations, described a Norse expedition deep into North America in the year 1362. The idea was astonishing. If genuine, the Kensington Runestone could prove that Scandinavian seafarers, centuries after their well-documented settlements in Greenland and Newfoundland, traveled hundreds of miles into the North American interior. It would predate Columbus's arrival by over a century, rewriting history as we know it. The text carved into the stone described a party of 30 Norsemen exploring the region by water. After losing several men to a mysterious attack, perhaps by local indigenous people or wild animals, the survivors supposedly left the inscription behind as a memorial. The runes referenced a date and gave a brief but harrowing account of their journey. Yet from the start, the stone was met with fierce skepticism. Linguists immediately noticed that the runic forms and vocabulary were inconsistent with what we'd expect from medieval Scandinavia. Some of the grammar and word choices more closely resembled 19th century Swedish dialects than the language of the 1300s, Geologists who examined the carving offered conflicting opinions. A few believed weathering patterns could indicate great age, while others saw signs of recent chisel marks, consistent with a relatively modern forgery. One glaring concern was that by the 14th century, Scandinavians had largely ceased the practice of carving runestones altogether. The tradition had faded by the 1200s. Complicating the picture further was the cultural climate of Scandinavian immigrant communities in 19th century Minnesota. Many settlers felt a strong connection to their ancestral homeland and may have been eager to establish a mythic Norse presence in America's past. The discovery of a Viking artifact could serve not only as a point of pride, but also as a source of attention, validation, and even tourism. Over the decades, scholars have debated the artifact endlessly. While a small number of enthusiasts defend its authenticity, the academic consensus is clear. The Kensington Runestone is almost certainly a modern hoax. Its linguistic anachronisms, convenient discovery context, and lack of corroborating artifacts all point to a clever fabrication. Nonetheless, it remains a powerful cultural symbol, especially for Scandinavian Americans. It reflects the deep yearning to find one's place in history, even if that history must be imagined. The possibility of Norse expeditions beyond the coastal settlements remains intriguing, but until further evidence surfaces, the Kensington Runestone stands not as proof, but as a compelling historical mystery. The Forgotten King. Among the pantheon of Viking legends, Ragnar Lothbrok stands out as the archetype of the Norse warrior, fierce in battle, clever in strategy, and destined for a heroic end. But was Ragnar a historical figure, or is he the product of centuries of storytelling? He is most famously known as the father of Viking icons, such as Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. Medieval sagas portray him as a king of Sweden or Denmark, descended from noble blood, whose sons waged war across England and the Frankish kingdoms. But most of these sources, like the tale of Ragnar's sons or Saxo Grammaticus's Gesta Danorum, were written 300 to 400 years after Ragnar's supposed lifetime. One of the most gripping tales tells of his capture by King Ella of Northumbria and execution by Snake Pit. According to legend, Ragnar was thrown into a pit filled with venomous serpents, but met his end with stoic defiance, singing of revenge and glory. His sons would later avenge him by leading the great heathen army into England in 865. Historical records do confirm the existence of a major Viking invasion at that time, and it was indeed led by figures with names matching those in the sagas. But this isn't definitive proof of Ragnar's life, only that someone by that name, or reputation, inspired real military action. Another frequently cited event attributed to Ragnar is the 845 raid on Paris. Frankish annals describe a Viking leader named Reginhirus, who extorted a huge ransom from the city and withdrew. Some believe this was Ragnar under a Latinized name, but the connection remains uncertain. Modern historians suggest that Ragnar may be a composite character, created by merging the exploits of several historical Viking leaders. Oral traditions tend to consolidate complex histories into singular figures, turning multiple warlords into one legendary hero. The sparse and poetic nature of runestones, combined with the scarcity of contemporary Viking written texts, makes it nearly impossible to trace his origin definitively. Despite the murkiness of his story, Ragnar persists as a central figure in Viking mythology. He represents the bravery, cunning, and ambition that defined the Norse era. Whether he truly lived or was forged from the fires of collective memory, his legend has endured for over 1,000 years.